Let's see. Are we live? We should be live. Just want to make sure. Yeah, we are. Let me get a mic check on my end. Now I have not gone. At least, heck, we're live now. Typically, I don't stream it to Twitter or X. I typically just do YouTube streams. So I'm testing out at least me going live on Twitter. I typically don't like going on live on things that I'm not looking at chat or whatever. Um, Sheets might join me. He might not. I'll probably be here for at least 40 minutes talking about this race and just going through and talk about it. If you guys have any questions or whatever, feel free to jump in chat and ask them. If not, we will just be looking at our own thing. Now, I'm going to use this mainly or only due to the fact that it'll give us something to look at, but I'm not worried about the projections. This is just something visual to look at, and it's not my own sheet, so I don't have to make anything or put anything up there. This is just I'm just using this to go through the grid here. Unlike NASCAR, where I don't care about the grid is extremely important in F1 clearly because you get the the teammate bonus at the end of the race, which is like one of the cornerstones of your lineup. Not only do we need all five guys, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, hey, there's five racers. All five beating their teammates. Typically, very rare that doesn't happen, or that all five aren't in the optimal. But it allows us to go through and look at everything. So when we just approach this slate here, okay, when we're looking at the salary, okay, what I automatically do entering any race is I just see what is going on at the bottom of the salary cap. Okay. Now, yet again, we'll talk about Gasly starting third in the runs that he's been going on. What's going on, Phil? What's going on, Kay? But typically, whenever I look at an F1 slate, first thing I look at is what's going on at the bottom. Okay, once we have the grid, because typically the starting point and what we can determine on what to do with lineups, and it'll dictate if we can pay up and chase guys up front or whatever, is what are we doing at the bottom? Okay, typically with Botas and Joe, it's normally a coin flip. Okay, they're typically starting both last, like 19th and 17th or 20th and 16th or whatever. Usually a coin flip, just straight up. Okay, the fact that we have Zhao starting 13th, in my view, would make him unplayable. Okay, in F1, we typically, and even sometimes we might not even need the value, but this is just usually where I start. If we can play the guy starting last, and if they are one of the three cheapest guys on the slate starting last, and if they have a chance to outscore their teammate, hell, even just by surviving through the field, okay, just surviving through the race, getting the 1 point for finishing the race, and if they finish outside the points, hell, they'll end up with 1 point. If they start last and gain 3 points or 3 positions, that we gain more DraftKings points and stuff. Whereas you look at, the guy who's 3,000 today starting 13th, regardless if he beats Botas or not, there's a real chance he loses positions in this race. Okay. Now we have seen Sauber do some wild shit with strategy between their two drivers this year. But when I'm looking at the bottom of the salary and I'm just trying to see, who can we reliably go to? Okay. And this is, changed on and off through the past couple of DFS or the past, season and a half, practically 2 seasons now for DFS. The drivers at the bottom will change. Last year was just playing the Williams guys, or it was the Haas drivers and stuff. Now, when we're looking here, we see 2 teams and 2 sets of teammates that are starting in the back of the field, that one has a pretty safe path. Like Botas cannot lose you any points. The worst he will score today is 0 points if he doesn't finish the race. Okay. He's not scoring negative. He only has upside. And the projection, as I said, I'm not looking at SaberSim stuff. I'm just speaking out loud. Like, his projection really doesn't matter. When we look at the percentage that he can either score similar or score better than his teammate, even in situations where he doesn't necessarily beat him, like, there's a real chance Joe could realistically finish 19th, Botas finishes 20th, you know? Zhou will lose. I'm not. Well, we can look at that really fast here, and I'm just going through this because this race doesn't start for freaking 8 hours. Like we can waste as much time as possible. Uh, Zhou will lose 3 points off of that 5 that he gets, so he'll be scoring 3 points at the end of this race if he were to finish like 19th and still beat Botas and stuff. And even then, I just don't see the reason to be taking that risk. So when I'm at the bottom of the salary and I start looking at who's viable and who isn't, and this is before we even look at lineups, I see Botas is pretty much a priority play and priority um, not safety wise, but if we and yet again, we haven't even looked at the top of the field yet. But when we look at how builds typically go, we're usually leaving anywhere from 0 to like 1,300 on the salary, and that's usually just due to 1v1s on teammates in F1. Now, last week or the last race we had at Brazil, I mean, that race was a absolute disgusting fest and stuff. And so you have situations like that to where, you'll leave like 4 grand on the table, whatever. But typically we're looking at outcomes and lineups that are leaving anywhere from 0 to 1,300 on the table with like a 1v1 between like an expensive teammate, right? So I see Botas is okay, 32, probably gonna be using Botas. When we look at another person in the back of the field who is starting right beside his teammate, who their team as a whole this year has struggled, that is Lance Stroll and Alonso. Now, when we look at Alonso being at 54, okay, and Stroll being at 36, as I said, Botas and Joe are usually a coin flip. Okay, they're separated by 200 points, typically week in and week out. It's 50-50 on if those guys will work out. The fact that Stroll is in the salary cap as well, his teammate is vastly more expensive and in a salary position that we aren't typically getting to. And like 54 is going to be really hard to get to because if you're in that range, you're probably going Perez or you're just going to like, you're in the 9 and 10K range. Like, and it's like no man's land for Alonso, which is why, and again, I'm not really truly looking at this, but it would make sense of why his projected ownership is so low. Like, duh, right? So when we're looking at the bottom here, I'm expecting a lot of lineups to either have one of Stroll or Botas or both of them together. Okay. So, like, that's the first part of the equation. Now, yet again, is that right or wrong? Is that who we want to play? First off, right now, we're just identifying, or what I'm doing is identifying where the field is most likely going to go and so on and so forth. Okay. So, like, that's the first thing I do. Secondly, is I then go ahead and look at, okay, where are the constructors right now? Okay, now yet again, anything can change. Anybody can wreck out in these races. But in terms of the favorite constructor entering the race before sims are ran, before projections are ran, and whatever, where are the teammates at? Okay. So we're not playing Sabre, we're not playing Aston Martin, like duh. Like where are the big four at? Where's McLaren, Ferrari, Red Bull, and Mercedes? Okay. So right off the bat, we see a big discrepancy of where the two Mercedes guys are at. Now Hamilton, yet again, I'm not worried about damage or anything, but he did get in the wall last night. That's why he qualified 10th. Okay. But we look at the drastic change between Russell starting first and Lewis Hamilton starting 10th. I'm not saying we can't have him finish on the podium, but it's very unlikely that Lewis will be able to drive up through the field and cause Mercedes to beat the teammates that are much closer together, which is Ferrari and McLaren. Okay. So just speaking on the way out or looking at it from here, we're most likely not using Red Bull constructor. We're most likely not getting to Mercedes. Now, anything can happen, whatever the case may be. But that's where we're at right now. So we're, you got to get going through this slate. The two constructors that I see are most likely just entering based off the grid are Ferrari and McLaren. Now, when we look at the speed that each of these teams have had this week, okay, Red Bull has not been where they've wanted to be in the practice sessions, in the queue. We're just seeing that Max is struggling this weekend as they have kind of been and poor Perez. Like what are we doing? Um, and Red Bull just keeps throwing him, just keeps putting him in terrible situations. Whether it was Q practice, like at the end of FP3 when that yellow came out. Like Red Bull was just goofing around, and Sergio wasn't even able to practice a start. Uh, Anywho, very unlikely that Red Bull constructor is going to work. Okay, we're seeing that, and that was me more so talking about Perez. We're seeing that Max just doesn't have the speed that we have wanted or that you would want to see on the street courses this year. Now, yes, he did win last weekend, came from the back of the field because we had so many restarts, we had so many people get grid penalties, we had so many people do so many things last weekend. I'm not really concerned about that. We don't expect any weather to be in play other than the cold temperatures tonight. So when we look at Max, as a guy who's probably going to compete, or when we look at Max as a guy, or we look at his percentage of finishing in the top three, combine that with what his price tag is on the slate, which is the most expensive guy, I think it's very unlikely that Max Verstappen will be in the optimal lineup today at the end of this race. Okay. So, yet again, going through the race, we're seeing where the values are going to go. We can kind of see who has a high likelihood of working and not working out. So that's where we're at with Max. When we look at the advantages that Mercedes has against Ferrari, when you look at them, and I mean, we're separated by a few tenths. Mercedes is able to get through the corners and leave at a much greater rate than the Ferrari teams. Specifically, when you look at Sainz and Russell, when you compare their laps, um, Russell slightly faster, but Ferrari is having a not even higher top speed, but they're able to run him down. You know, I mean, clearly we haven't seen them side by side, but when you're looking at their laps, Mercedes is leaving them out of the corner, and Ferrari is able to practically run them down on the straightaways. Add that to DRS, I think I would give the advantage to the Ferrari drivers over Russell being able to win this race. Now, whether it be Sainz, Leclerc, that's up to whatever happens there. But I think between the starting grid up front, and then again, DRS is always going to help Max, but I think a Ferrari driver wins this race. I would expect Russell to probably finish second or third in this event. Now, I don't know if both of the Ferrari guys are going to be in the podium places. I just lean probably a Ferrari will probably win this. And I would honestly kind of lean on this race that no constructor will get the bonus for having both guys in the top three. I think there will be, I think the winning constructor will probably have the race winner and the guy in fourth or fifth. But I don't think we're going to see Ferrari be able to maintain both drivers in the top three. I think Max is probably going to run third and compete to fight for second. I just don't think he wins. So when we're analyzing stuff like that and we're looking at it this way, the next coin flip that we typically have at the bottom of the salary, but now we have at the top this week are the two Ferrari drivers. Now, I would expect their projected finish and their projected DFS scores to be very similar. I think each of them have about a 50-50 outcome. Now, we can look at what SaberSim is projecting them for. Now, yet again, this is just just what their stuff is saying here, okay? But I think we're probably going to see a pretty similar range of outcomes, and that is what we're seeing between the percentages that they each of these two guys score 20. This is what you should can be considering in your head. I don't have a favorite between Sainz and Leclerc. I think it's just going to be a 1-for-1. And if you notice, we have $1,000 difference between these drivers. We're not playing both, at least for me, and until shit hits the fan and people and things change. We're not playing both Ferrari drivers because we want the Ferrari constructor, okay? So the 1v1 is going to be between Sainz and Leclerc. So there'll be a lot of different builds that will leave, the $1,000 on the table or more, whatever the case your last guys are, but it'll be separated by 1,000 between if it's going Sainz Leclerc. So now that we're here, I mean, we can go ahead and look at what we're looking here. So just based off of SaberSim. Now, yet again, I haven't determined what lineups I'm playing. I'm just looking through what they're showing here. We can kind of go through and talk about this slate here. Well, first off, sorting by projected score, so we can very just quickly see, hey, what are the highest projected lineups currently, projecting for? So it's very easy to, as I said, get both Stroll and Bottas mainly because they can't really lose you anything. Okay, worst thing that Stroll is going to give you is a 0. Worst thing Bottas is going to give you is a 0. Most of the time, when they finish this race, they're going to end with the 1 point for finishing the race. The fact that, I mean, Zhao, anything can happen with him, but the fact that Alonso and Stroll are right beside each other, a real 50-50 chance of who beats who there. Um, I would probably give the bonus to Alonso more so than not. I would probably flip these two projections personally, but it doesn't really matter. It's a 50-50 chance between both those guys. So we see that Stroll and Bottas are in a lot of these higher scoring lineups because you're paying up for the race winner. We're not really focusing on Verstappen. I guess we could if we, or I guess you could if you're expecting him to win the race, or if you want lineups that have his have him in the lineup, because these high projected lineups right now, 48-8, 48-3, 49-8, 50 flat, which I think there's a lot open up right now to leave, anywhere from, like I said, that 1,000 to 1,300 to 1,600 on these lineups because we're not paying up for the most expensive guy in Verstappen, and we're just doing a 50-50 between Sainz and Leclerc. So, what can also change this race? Okay, since we're leaving salary on the table, or we're expecting to, right? The other outcome that is going to play huge in this race, and he did in the last GPP last week or 2 weeks ago, whenever they ran it, is Gasly. Okay, the fact that he finished third last weekend really, really broke the slate, or in the last race, not last weekend. Because you end up having somebody who is, in the 4K range, in that mid tier range, with the chance on like a baseline of probably scoring 5 or 4 points, if not 6 or 7 as like a baseline. And that's if he, drops down like seventh or eighth. If Gasly, who has shown speed, I mean, that was just not because the race was crazy last weekend. He has shown consistent speed. He's been qualifying well, and he's had top 10 speed at certain points based on strategy. There's a real chance that Gasly can be the priority when we start looking at what we're doing in this race. Now, now we're just looking at projected score right now. These have Gasly, Stroll, and Bottas. There's a real chance that it could be Bottas and Gasly, or Stroll and Gasly, because we're leaving salary on the table. We can pay up instead of getting two guys starting in the back of the field. We can have a chance of having a guy who's starting third, who has a real high likelihood that he's going to finish in the points and beat his teammate, because Ocon is all the way in 11th. We got Gasly starting third. That's pretty significant place difference between the two guys on a road course, or on a street course that passing is probably going to be pretty difficult once everybody gets spread out. And once we start moving on, now yet again, this is just projected lineups. We're seeing that we aren't necessarily, having to bottom punt as much. We're not, as we continue to go down, like, sure, we see Stroll and Bottas, but we're not having to go to the bottom of the salary. We're still leaving plenty on the table. Okay. Even in lineups that aren't going to the very bottom. And so the secondary fork in the road is the value coming from the back of the field, with the potential of Stroll and Bottas beating Zhao and Alonso, or one of those guys being pushed out because Gasly can finish like 6th today and get the 5 bonus points and where he's needed. Okay, so like those are the two main forks in the road that I think you can not really. I was going to say simulate. I think those will be the two forks in the road that are showing what can be optimal, and it's optimal. Hey, if Gasly can stay in the top 8, builds that lean towards him will go in their own direction. Hey, Gasly fails and you need Stroll and Bottas or one of those guys, and that's the other direction. Okay. Because of that, we're really working with the 3 remaining positions tonight. So that's the captain, and that's your other 2 drivers that you're paying up for. Okay, and yet again, anything can change. Like, say Leclerc crashes or whatever, removes Ferrari, and then probably, McLaren or Mercedes would then, be de facto as the constructor that you would have to go to and stuff. But we're going to keep talking, and I'm at least going to, go on the precedent that Ferrari is the winning constructor today. Okay, so what are we doing up top, like past that? Okay. Now this is using the SaberSim stuff, and we're trying to get an idea of where people are going to go and stuff. And I have found, and I've mentioned it, since SaberSim did their update this year on NBA DFS and even the uh, Grand Prix last week before all the rain and everything hit and everybody like ran issues. When I was looking back at these races and running the SaberSim contest sims and stuff, the lineups that have a high win rate are the lineups that are correlating very well with independent sims from other people of, hey, these are the highest projected lineup or the best lineups or whatever the case may be. Okay, now I don't know how it's going to work out for this one because we got like some Mercedes and stuff popping through. And just because we have the two main forks in the roads, we're not seeing like one true build uh played out because normally we just have like the value guys we're focusing with. So it's much easier to like zoom in on what drivers would be optimal. If you're building with Gasly, that's a drastically different build than if you're double punting with like Stroll and Botas and stuff. So the win percentage is gonna this is the highest one we have right now is 0.97% of winning. When that isn't the case, we typically see this higher on SaberSim, and we'd see that higher in other sims and stuff. So, like factoring in the two forks in the road, we can still get a good idea of what lineups will be popular and stuff, or what builds would end up being popular. And what we're mainly trying to figure out is where we're at in the constructors or the captains here. Now, I would personally lean because, as I said, I think a Ferrari driver wins. So I would probably prioritize Leclerc or Sainz as the captain that I would want to look at. I don't see that. I don't see salary being a real issue today. So it's not like we need the discount that Russell is giving us in the captain uh, spot. This is just whoever you project to win would probably be the captain here. But once you start going through and looking at the percentage of exposure between the rest of these drivers here, and you look at the expensive guys starting up front, it's Leclerc, Sainz, the coin flip between the two Ferrari guys of who wins, so on and so forth. It's then Russell, Max Verstappen, and then we're really not going to Lando for the most part. Now, yet again, this is just looking at top 1,000 lines on here, and the four constructors that I used for this was this to try and condense the amount of lines that we're just kind of looking at here. Like Oscar is probably not viable today at all. Even if Lando wrecks out, we don't see Oscar winning this race. At 10,000, that's going to be too expensive. Lando could wreck out, Oscar can finish fourth and probably not be needed. Let me take a gander really fast. Let me check. What did I say? Fourth, 12, 17, 18 points. That would still be close for Oscar. I don't see Oscar being in play. Lando, based on these ownerships, like if you're trying to like get solo wins and stuff, I would probably start prioritizing Lando over one of the Ferrari guys, hoping that one of the Ferrari guys wrecks out, or put in Lando in a 1v1 between him and Russell. Like those are like how I would get different just based on the discount and ownership that we're getting and kind of the poor projection that we realistically see from Lando. But the builds that we're seeing, let me go ahead and grab a Google sheet for me to type really fast, and give me a moment here. Sorry. Is my keyboard gonna work? Heck yeah, dude. Heck yeah, brother. Let's rock and roll. So we would have the two. So we have the two Ferrari guys. Oops. So we have the two Ferrari guys being 1v1s. We have Russell being probably the primary addition to this. but then it's probably Russell being a 1v1. Oops. Probably be a 1v1 here between Lando, and Max up top. So these are pretty much the outcomes that we're running into up top, or for like the expensive guys between the captains and the other two drivers you're with. And then the main one is going to be between what do we do with Botas? Oops, let me go here. With what is it? So we have so this is pretty much what I would break the slate down. And I mean, we've been talking this whole time, but this is pretty much what I see the slate coming down to or as. Um, with the two Ferrari drivers being 1v1s, Russell either with these two guys or Russell if you're fading Russell, right? Like, starting first, as I said, I think the Ferraris with DRS can probably beat McLaren, especially with their long run. Like going, I don't even think it's like heads up. I really think with DRS, I think Ferrari would have an advantage on this with the two long straightaways, and then they can whoever it is can just block Russell. They can just beat him to the apex on at the end of the straightaways, and I think they can very easily get around him. Like if Ferrari has DRS with Russell, I think they can get away. I think they can pass Russell and keep him behind him. Um, whereas, like, if Russell gets a good run out with DRS and stuff and passes Ferrari again, I think they can very easily pass him back. I think the advantage will go to the Ferraris. Um, once we get in that sense, like say Russell gets passed and you have the two Ferrari guys like 1-2 or 1-3 or whatever. Um, I think Max, despite the fact that they have been slow on speed and not handling the way they want to be, and then certainly they're not going to dominate like they did last year. I think Max can then beat Russell. Okay, so like this is what we're doing up top, and then the value with this train being here of what fork in the road ends up working here. I don't have a lean on this at all. Um, it's showing right now. Where are we at here? Right now, based on the contest sims that SaberSim provides, we look at win rate and we're seeing that, look at the top 1,000, that is leaning Stroll. No, it SaberSim, let's see real fast here. I'm going to say that it's going to lean the higher projected ones with Gasly, but probably a bigger majority would be with Botas and or Stroll, which that's what we're seeing here. It's also showing Mercedes on the higher win rate, which I don't necessarily agree with because, like, you look at this one with like a 91% or a projection of 91, and we see the other ones at like 108. Like that's a pretty significant jump. I'm not. Uh, Yet again, this win rate on like these Mercedes lines are probably what the lines look like if Ferrari crashes out or whatnot. Like these would probably be the priority Mercedes lineups, yeah, or what I would assume, right? Um, we look at ROI, which is going to probably lean more into the Mercedes stuff of like, hey, if we want a higher return on investment, you probably want to fade the Ferrari chalk, right? Which is that's why we're just seeing a shitload of Mercedes stuff. Whereas we look at dupes here. We are looking at this. So, like, going through SaberSim, typically what I would do, especially for these, is I would I'd probably want to avoid these lineups or understand that we're going to have a lot of duplications here. Not very much salary left over, paying up in quite a few situations here, just not high enough to get to Gasly. But even here, like this 1v1, right? This with Russell captain, which probably not a lineup I'm using. As I said, I've said my reservations about Russell out loud enough so far, but like Russell captain, Science, Yuki, Albon, Stroll. Okay, the same lineup with Leclerc or not, yeah, with Leclerc in here is 49.5. You know, so not only are you running into a duplication with this lineup, you're also running into a duplication with this 1v1 being with Science and Leclerc and stuff. So being aware of all that, or at least like understanding that that's what we're going to be running into today. Let's see, we're like 40 minutes or half an hour into breaking this down. Secondly, because we have a lot of 1v1s and stuff. Actually, I probably, I started with like, oh, leaving like 800 to 1300. I actually don't think salary really matters at all today. Um, unless we're using, what are the only thing I haven't looked at yet. So what are the max like? We'll leave it on dupes. What are the max for Verstappen lines looking like? So also, I mean, these lines also, I do want to add, I haven't talked about it yet. I don't think it's going to work here because I don't know if Stroll or Bottas passes enough people to get it done at the bottom of the salary. Because I think most outcomes we're seeing Stroll and Bottas, even if they are successful, they're going to probably be scoring 6 to 8 points. The 8 might get it done. And what I'm speaking out loud right here is we'll use Bottas starting last. He starts last. And the outcomes that he is the winning teammate between him and Zhao. What is he doing? Is he going from 19th or is he going from 20th to 19th and his teammate wrecked out and he just gets the 5 bonus points plus the 1 for finishing, so he ends up with 6 points? Does he gain, where are we at? Got to refer to the rules. Does he gain the 3 positions from 20th to like 16th and beat his teammate? So that's 5 points. Finish the race, that's 6, plus the 2 for gaining positions. So what is he at? He's at 8 points there. So as I talk out loud about this, it's more unlikely that Stroll will be able to manage an outcome like that, but Bottas would be more likely in outcomes that he wins, which we could probably see that by. Ooh, see, I think that's quite low. See, because in my head, I'd be like, he's not being his teammate, right? So his outcomes would be 1.3 if he gains enough positions, but it's unlikely in situations where Bottas gains like 3 to 5 positions that he isn't already beating his teammate, because then he'll be racing right beside him and stuff. So maybe that is an outcome worth justifying. But his range's outcome of like, I would argue that it'd probably be very unlikely from like 4 to 6 points, and it's him scoring 1 or him scoring 8, 9, or 10 points. Okay. Reason I'm bringing that up is once we look at Verstappen, like we're paying up for Verstappen, right? Or we're just kind of seeing where we're at here. It views Bottas to be inviable if he scores 8, 9, 10 points or whatever. So like that's the other avenue, right? Like, we're talking about the constructors being from these guys, but we then look at Bottas and his potential outcomes of what he can score in this race. And so in terms of captains would probably, I'm not going to play Russell, but a lot of stuff showing Russell because I'm kind of bullish on him not winning the race. But it's probably Russell, the 2 Ferrari guys. I don't think I'd play Lando. I don't think I'd play Max. And then I think I would probably prioritize Bottas. Like your 4 guys, your 4 captains you should probably have exposure to in this race would be Russell, Ferrari, Bottas, and goddamn, probably Gasly. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's 5 captains. I think that should be the only captains that I would probably look at here. We gonna get big here, dude? We're gonna grow. These would be the five captains that I probably consider in today's race. Um, I think that's mainly it. I was gonna look at the Verstappen lines, but his stuff really doesn't matter because Russell um, is either with the Ferraris, or at that point it's a 1v1 between Lando and Max, and the outcome or the percentage that 1v1 is what is happening to be optimal is probably the exact same percentage that you would have Max in your lineups anyway. Like if you have a portfolio of, let's say, 20 lineups today, which that's still expensive. Uh, I would assume, hell, even if you're doing 10 lineups in the 15, you would probably have Max in two anyway. Uh, which I think that's probably where Max should be at, anywhere from 20 to 25 in your lineups, because that's the likelihood that he is coming into play in the flex. So I don't think we need to really go through and look at the Max lineups and stuff. The slate changes drastically. I think if you are looking to solo this race, or you are specifically looking to have the biggest edge to the field, is I would I mean, not fade, because I don't think the way F1 plays out is typically like these good. I mean, the good players are, even if even if you're entering 50 lineups, you're still running um probably 10 lineups 5 times each or whatever. Um, where was I going with that? If you're looking to like solo or probably have the biggest, solo win imaginable, that would probably lean towards Mercedes constructor or McLaren constructor lineups, and hoping that one of the Ferrari guys crashes out, and if not both. So that is the way I'd go if I was trying to solo, which I don't really like. I Out of all the races, I don't know if this is one that I would purposely, because I'm not gonna be doing a lot of lineups, right? I just don't feel like this is the race where the Ferrari guys are gonna run into issues and crash out. Now, we could very easily have a safety car and Ferrari has no idea what they're doing on pit lane and stuff, but I feel like in situations where Ferrari fails, it's because one of their drivers is wrecking out, and I just don't think that's gonna happen tonight. I'll see what you guys are saying really fast. See what the chat is saying. Thank you for joining me on Twitter and YouTube. Let me see what is going on here. Um, Garrett, the reason you're not getting Science and Leclerc together is because if they are both scoring well, that means the Ferrari constructor is scoring well. And here, I'll just show you. Okay, so I mean, I could probably show this on my own sheet better. But in like speaking out loud, okay, as regardless of what happens or whatever, like the Ferrari guys are starting up front. It's more than likely that the Ferrari drivers are going to finish in the top five. Both drivers in the top five. Even if we just look at where these guys are or have been finishing stuff recently, you see like just last like fucking 6 races, Leclerc's finishes have been fifth, third, first, fifth, second, first, third, fourth, right? And then we look at Sainz, and you see him finish 16th, first, second, seventh, 18th, fourth, fifth, sixth, fifth, third, sixth. Okay, so the most likely outcome is both Ferrari drivers are finishing in the top 6. Okay, so which we will show you here, it would not be wise for you, especially when we look at the DraftKings scoring for people, for drivers. First place 25th, 18th, 12th, 10th, so on and so forth, for where these positions are. It would make no sense to like play both Ferrari drivers. Let's just say, for example, they finish third and fifth. Okay, that's 15 points finishing third. That's 10 points for finishing fifth. Add an additional 5 points for the guy who beats his teammate, and then 2 points for each of those guys finishing the race. So we're at 21, 11, right? 21, 11. Yeah, so we'd be at 32 points. Okay. Whereas that constructor would then be scoring, and I don't have my stuff open right now, but we see the Ferrari constructor would be drastically outscoring the combination of using the two drivers. Typically, when we see two drivers from the same team be optimal in F1, it is value drivers. Um, because like if the Ferrari guys are doing well, this is most likely the constructor scoring. To where so you wouldn't want to play both Ferrari drivers because you're just like you would just play the Ferrari constructor because then most likely they're the highest constructor and you're just fading them and then look at the gap you're creating, and this is just mean projections here, but we got a 13-point difference here, 16 here. Like you would not want to do that. Like that's like the dumbest thing you could do is playing like two guys from the same team. Just play one guy and then the constructor. What else? What else was I talking about? I don't really see any other questions. Let me check Twitter. If Twitter's even active. Let me see. I do believe that's it. Cool. No comments on Twitter, nothing like that. We do have 28 views, so I guess that's fine. So yeah, I do believe that is the breakdown. Yet again, we have 7 hours until the slate locks. I haven't determined where I'm gonna go personally, driver wise. I know for a fact I'm probably just gonna lean into Ferrari constructor. I'll probably just do the 1v1 between the two Ferrari drivers. My gut feel is that Bottas has a high chance of working tonight in the flex and or captain. That's just going to come down to what Max does. I think Bottas, if you're playing Max flex, you're probably playing more Bottas in the captain than normal. But I think if Max scores well, the most correlated driver that could work in that lineup would probably be Bottas or Stroll. But I think it'd probably be Bottas. I will probably not be using Gasly and just hope and anti-sweat him for the whole race. What else? I like the idea of not playing Russell. I mean, as I said, I've been here for like 45 minutes just talking out loud. Now I'm at the point of like, hey, what do I want to do? What do I see as advantages or situations that I might want to take advantage of? I feel like not playing Russell has a chance of working today. And because if Russell's projected so well, um, we see him have a high percentage in the captain position and in the flex. I think a way that you can get different that isn't just entirely stupid would be using Russell as the 1v1 and getting more exposure to Lando or Max Verstappen in those lineups. I think that's the direction I would probably lean from a DFS perspective, from a contest perspective of trying to get different. Otherwise, there's a real potential that the optimal lineup today really does have a big ass train of like probably 33 to 64 lineups. I think that's how I would get different if I was going to do that. Let me see if there's anything else, and if not, I think that'll be it. How much is Albon? Okay, so yeah, just real quick because it was brought up by Andrew. You know, the feller, he wrecked last night, took like a 50G impact. There hasn't been any word right now that he's not going to race, but yet again, race is 8 hours away, so anything can happen here. Albon being 4,000, his most, and this kind of happened last week with, pretty sure that's what happened last week because Albon didn't race, if I'm not mistaken. Who didn't race? Yeah, so Albon didn't race last race because they ran out of fucking issues and stuff or cars. And Franco started 16th and finished 17th. Reason being, he defeats his teammate by default, but and he crash out. So realistically, instead of scoring 5, he scores 6. Um, Albon starting 18th. Teammate didn't start. Automatic 5 points. Might argue to gain the 3 positions. 6, 7. 7 points from fourth. What is he? 4,000. 7 from 4 would be competing with. He's competing directly against Yuki and Lawson, Stroll, Bottas, and Zhao. 7. Okay, so my first thought would be I'd probably prioritize Stroll and Bottas. If that's the case, and his teammate doesn't start, yet again, we're not tied on salary. We don't need the salary. How big is this contest today? It's 3,100 people. That would just be probably a 1v1 between Albon, Stroll, and Bottas. I think you could just replace one of those 3 guys or one of those 2 with Albon. I would probably not prioritize him. I'd have to rerun stuff because everything on here and all my stuff is ran with Franco in the race. Maybe things might change there. He might be played more. I think in the grand scheme of things up top, captain wise, it's not changing much because we're what would we be jumping up from? We'd be from 3,600 from Stroll to 4,000, so that's 400 there. Where are we at? Bottas 32. That's 800. I don't think it makes that much of a difference because we're not using a lot of the salary anyway. So if Albon is his only teammate, then we can pencil him for like 6 points right off the bat. He would probably be prioritized in sims and stuff because instead of giving outcomes to these other guys, you would see that he has he 100% of this time he's going to score 5 points at the worst. I don't really know. I don't know how to answer that question without running stuff on myself, Andrew. I don't feel like it would be that drastic of an impact, but I could be wrong. At the moment, I don't know. Also, I know you put valuable. Value and viability. I mean, I was looking at it more so if you typed in like how viable is Alex. Value, I mean, he'll probably be one of the better guys value wise, but I don't know what his outcomes would be because then you just add him to the outcomes of the 2 value guys and Gasly, and then we're at like a third fork in the road, right? The ones that Albon scores 5 by default and you just eat the 4,000 because salary isn't a constraint. Gasly, like you need gas, like hell, it might be a situation where you play Gasly and Albon together, right? And then the 2 like pump plays and stuff. Good question. Good pondering. I would revisit that later tonight. Like if we know for a fact that his teammate's not going to start, and then I'd probably pay more attention to that at this moment. I don't really have a feel, despite the fact I've been talking 5 minutes on it. I do believe that's it. Thank you guys for hanging around, checking it out. I will leave you guys to this. I'm sad Sheets wasn't able to make it, but we were able to go over a lot. We've identified probably how the field's going to play and where things would go. And then we talked about how to take advantage of that from my contest perspective. I think we talked about everything. Or not advantage, but identifying like the Ferrari thing. Like if you want a solo, you'd probably hope Ferrari like wrecks both guys, right? Even if that isn't a likely outcome, that'd probably be like the direct like pivot to try and like solo win a day. I do believe that's it. Thank you guys very much for being here. I'll see you guys at some point in the future, but thank you for listening, and hopefully this helps you and enjoy the race. I'll see you guys later. Bye bye.